Here's our complete interview with the great Elliott Randall. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Book. Remember, if you want to support the channel, there are links in the description. You can either buy a t-shirt, make a donation on PayPal, or join our Patreon. Here's Elliott Randall.
My philosophy since like 1969, when I was with the group C Train, we had a horrible breakup with the singer. And as it turned out, I sort of formed this opinion based on what I know about families, and I had been involved with psychology for quite a while. I think bands are essentially dysfunctional families. No matter how much you all love each other, at some point, something's going to rock the boat to the point where it tips. And so, I wish all bands the very, very best of luck. And obviously some have been able to work their way through it over all the years. But in general, I like to be happy. And so to me, the two of the biggest moments of happiness for me would be being in the studio and creating, which sometimes can be really quite a challenge because it's not just you being creative, it's you also being creative and making your client, the producer, the artist, the engineer, making everybody feel like, yeah, this is really right. And sometimes it comes in an instant. The Leadon thing was, it was a one-taker. So it was like, yeah, they should all be like this. But in reality, they're not all like that. So sometimes you got to work a little extra hard. And
you know yourself, though. That's the, I've heard you say this before about not wanting, sorry to interrupt you, but there's some people sometimes, the machinery, which is you. The thing is, sometimes when people aren't aware of what's good and bad for them, I know the conversation you had with Jimi Hendrix, Isle of Wight. That's a cautionary tale but all that stuff. It's like you got information over here, and you obviously knew when money gets involved in bands, things get complicated. But it's almost like you took all this in. You were paying attention.
Yeah, not all the time. Because look, we all have to make mistakes, and those mistakes prove to be life lessons. I remember back in the early 70s, I was managed by the Robert Stigwood organization, and I had just come off of an Eric Mercury tour, and Rick Gunnell, who's this really legendary British manager come rogue. But I say that with a lot of heart because I always loved him. Comes over to me. We're at the Whiskey A Go-Go, actually. It's a very vivid memory. And he's smoking this great big Cuban stogie. And he says, "Kid, I'm going to make you a star. Are you on for it?" Yeah, great. Not realizing all of the mechanics behind what making a star is all about. So he signed me with Polydor Records. I got signed to the Steely organization. Everything was great. And then you realize that it's less great than you think. I got you a $250,000 contract, which back in 71 was a lot of dough. But the $250,000 contract covered 5 albums. So all of a sudden, each album's 50,000. And, stuff like that. It's the way of the world. And with all of the things that I've learned, and some of the things that I haven't, I try now to approach making music in a way that simply makes me happy. If I can sell some of my product, and when I say product, and it sounds awful, but it is product, whether it's a painting or a piece of music, that makes me happy because it pays for my hobby. I just love to be in my studio. This is my little production room, and it's just filled with goodies, and I can come up here. I can avoid some of the news because, a steady stream of news is not that good these days. And I I'll either work on something, a project that I've already started for somebody else or for myself, or I'll open up a blank session and look at it and say, this is my palette, right? And I like to think that I make sound paintings. I mean, some of them are, on the commercial end of it, and some of them are pretty far out, but it makes me happy to do it.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's that thing about I've looked, you have a few years on me probably, but I'm 62, and at my age, I'm working harder, but with less stress than I ever have because of just learning, hard fought lessons. But Elliott, I'll look at some paths that I could have taken. Like I got a job in San Diego as a evening new age NAC format guy. Mm-hmm. And I remember I didn't take it because I didn't have a green card, but there was I sometimes look at a thing like that and say, if I would have done that, and I know you said this about the Blues Brothers, yeah, I'd be probably dead now. I'd probably be dead. Do you have a lot? I mean, turning down these things, the first lesson is always you've said this before. Are you crazy? But again, going back to that going, if I put myself in that room, bad things might happen to me, or else I'll be uncomfortable, or my quality of life won't be there.
Yeah, I generally think it through a little bit more quickly. It's am I going to be happy? Do I think I'm going to be happy in 2 or 5 years' time? And if the answer is maybe not, I have to really give it a little bit of extra thought. Mm-hmm. When somebody calls me for the studio, 9 out of 10 times I'll say yes, because generally I'll know who they are, I'll know what their quality of work is, and I'll come in. If it's to play live, that's a whole nother story. Playing live, by the way, is the other half of the equation of the things that make me really, really happy. But I love entertaining. I love going out and getting that visceral feeling when you're connecting with an audience. There's nothing like it. I can't describe it in any kind of words that would do it justice.
So you're not shy. You're not shy. That's the thing.
No, not at all.
Everyone would probably think you're shy. Sorry, I interrupted you there. You were going
No, it's all right. I had my second guitar teacher was Roy Smeck. I don't know if you know the name. He was born in 1900. He was called the Wizard of the Strings. And and I love Les Paul, even though Les Paul is credited with having done the first multi-tracks, Roy actually did one as a short film. They divided the screen into 4 parts. And on one part he's playing banjo, another part he's playing uke, another part he's playing lap steel, and another he's playing legitimate guitar. And he was such a force. He was a very loving guy. He loved his music. He loved his students. He taught like probably 5, maybe 6 days a week, all day long. And he imparted these incredible life lessons with me. The most important one being, kid, you got to smile more. You got to make them think you're having a good time. And then you got to have a good time. And it stuck. It absolutely stuck.
Like, what else did he tell you? I mean, that's there are people that we meet in our lives, and all of a sudden it's like we all cherry pick with advice, of course, but at the same time, there are people you do less cherry picking, and you just have a certain trust with what they say.
That's right. And with Roy, I mean, given that I started studying with him when I was like 12 years old, yeah. So he got me as a young, hot up and comer, or an up and comer who thought he was hot. And Roy entertained all of my dreams, but he also made it very clear that I had a real job to do in terms of learning the instrument, learning how the instrument gets along with other instruments, and being a part of an ensemble. And I noticed that you had a little chat with Jeff about ego on one of your interviews. And my take on ego has been for a very, very long time. Of course, I've got an ego. Everybody has an ego. But what do you do with it? How do you figure out ways to filter what needs to go into being a good person? And in terms of ego as a musician, I think that the supreme ego is to say, okay, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to do the best I can for whoever it is who's asked me to come and play. And by going higher up than the, hey, it's me, I'm playing, it's the, hey, I'm servicing the piece of music. And that to me is that, is what ego should be about or should be thought about.
I've looked at a lot of celebrity. I'm fascinated by, because in radio, we're known as the bottom feeders of entertainment. If I go up on stage in front of 20,000 people, which I've done, and am I introducing a band as the radio guy, I can see like 20,000 people saying, "Get the hell off the stage, radio guy." But we want to see the band. But I'm fascinated by how people react to fame, because the cliche thing people say is, you become a celebrity and emotionally you could possibly stop growing emotionally. You just do for some people, because it affects people. I mean, speaking of ego, it affects people in really derogatory ways. Meanwhile, they think they're on the ride of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I've been there personally. I mean, I've taken a few more drinks than I should have. I've taken a few more drugs than I should have. Thankfully, I've survived. I married a wonderful woman, English woman, who.
That's why you're there. That's why you're there.
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm here. Yes.
Okay.
I'll tell you about that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
She's basically saying, look, if you lead a really healthy life, you'll be around a lot longer and you'll enjoy it. I believed her, and I pretty much stopped everything. I've got a few nasty little habits, but they're very, very minor. And, it's about being able to perceive the world around you in a conscious sense. What's going on? How can I make this world a slightly better place? And obviously with music and the various arts, one of those goals is to, and people will say it's about vibes. Yeah, it's about vibes, but it's also about, setting a standard by which other people can take an example.
So you're more mindful now. You're just more mindful. You're just more present, as the cliche would go. But these, they're cliches because they're true. And that's something that some people never, to be in your body, to like be there. Because that thing when we're 20, we're like jumping. It's like we've had 20 cups of coffee and we've not had none, even before the drugs or alcohol. There's that thing that happens when you're young, when you're in your body, that you're not quite in it. Maybe it's a thing of age where by default we're forced to be in it when it's a little more sore, but that's again, quality of life. I mean, as you can tell, I talk about this stuff a lot with artists. Yeah. That's just my thing. I'm not a techie guy. So even though I will ask you some of those questions, but so how did you stop doing these little habits? Because I find the audience is really interested in when they go on a journey with someone, they're all the information about, we'll get through that stuff, but about you as a human guy, like a guy stopping that and making a conscious decision to say, like you said, I want to be here longer. I want to be more present.
Okay. So a good example of that would be, let's discuss a really forbidden substance, coke, right? Obviously, as a young rock musician, it was all over the place. And I, like most of my peers, went, I'll give this a try, The thrill wore off. There's a great old saying, which is, you try it the first time and it's never the same afterwards. And it's true. But, one of the real wake-up calls was when my friend John Belushi passed away. And I know why. There's some other people whose names I won't even mention who have had the same problem. And you can die. You're gone. Okay, you've made some great music. You're a legend, blah, blah, blah. But you're not around to enjoy it for what could have been the rest of your life. So with Jane, it was very easy. My wife, she said, about this stuff, Elliott, you must promise me that you will never, ever do it again. And I promised that I would never do it again, faithfully. And I didn't. It wasn't that hard to say, to say, right, I won't. Because but as I said, by that point, the thrill had worn off.
So that's interesting because let me interrupt you because there's that thing coming from a long line of alcoholics. There's that thing where I've heard uncles and people say, "Oh yeah, when I say that word, oh no, I won't." There's a little thing in their head saying, "Well, I'm going to try," or something like that. So by that time, you were there.
I was done. Yeah. And I was also done with alcohol because, not because I drank too much. I mean, although I probably did in comparison to some other people. But I wound up getting really, really sick. I was doing one of my stranger gigs. I was doing front of house sound for a band in Ecuador. And something happened where I was walking out of the hotel in a rage. I'm wearing sunglasses, and I couldn't see the door. So the sunglasses and my face right into the door. I wound up cutting my eyebrow, and they took me to a local hospital, which in Quito, Ecuador, they sewed me up. And when I came back to the States a couple of weeks later, I went to see my GP. When he looked at me, he said, "Elliott, I think you've got hepatitis." I was orange, man. I was, so he sent me to New York's best hepatologist, who said, "Yeah, you've got something. It's not A or B, but your liver is definitely messed up." Make a long story short, I couldn't even smell alcohol without wanting to puke.
Wow.
So, I got saved. I mean, it wasn't one of those, AA, with all respect, it wasn't one of those convenings, but it was like, right, I got to stop.
Good for you.
Good. So now the music gets me high. The music gets me really, really high.
Imagine that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, given the state of the world today, where it's not like people congregate the way they used to, and I'm still being very, very careful about COVID. I'm asthmatic, and I sure as hell don't want anything to happen to me. So I've had
my wife has an autoimmune. My wife, sorry to interrupt. My wife has an autoimmune disease. My daughter, by default, she's 24. She's autistic. Takes anti-seizure medication, so she's immune compromised. I'm one of those few people who goes into like Costco or something and wears a mask. And yeah,
we do that too. We still wear masks virtually everywhere. I have a dear friend I've not seen in years. A guy that we got to know each other in junior high school. And we've kept in touch all of these years. He's a trumpet player. We went to music and art high school together after that. And he and his wife and two other people are coming over Friday. So what we've done is we've made arrangements to be able to sit in a nice outdoor cafe and keep things as safe as possible. It just makes sense to me.
I don't know if you know Joel Diamond.
Which one? The producer?
The keyboard player? He's not a keyboard player. I guess he's a producer. He was involved in the background an awful lot, music publishing and
the Silver Fox. That one
is that what they call him?
Yeah.
Anyway, interesting cat. I had a long interview with him, and we were talking about Laura Nero, and I said, yeah, but I said, she just struck me as, and I don't do a lot of dirt unless it's there. If it's there, I have to ask the pink elephant question, like, like Lou Gramm and Mick Jones. I had to ask that. But,
sure.
Well, I asked Joel, I said, she just seemed eccentric to me. I said, I'd see her in interviews, and I'm going, I like unapologetic people for interviews. They're great for interviews because they're colorful. You went to school with her. What was, from your standpoint, what was she like? And I know you recorded with her.
She was a great character. She was a very loving character. Eccentric, yes. She believed in the music that she wrote. And happily, it didn't take too long before she was discovered. And I'm not really sure how she felt about having most of her tunes covered by other acts, and they were the ones who had the success on it. But, when Laura did a song, she could make you cry. She could make you laugh. She was just a most wonderful woman. And Jane and I always refer to her as Mama Earth. Because she is, she was. I mean, she was just this wonderful person.
Well, you recorded her last album. I mean,
Mm.
they posthumously released another one after that, but the last album while she was alive, what was the vibe going into that with her?
Well, it was interesting. Gary Katz was producing.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing about Gary is he has this incredible knack, this incredible talent for surrounding himself with all of the right people for the job. And he did. It was great. I mean, as I recall, Jerry Jamot was playing bass. I think Paul Griffin was playing keyboards as well. It was just an incredible experience. And she was delighted. She was really, she had so much fun participating in and listening to how we responded musically to what she was doing.
What was the last time you'd seen her before you went to that session?
God, years and years before. I think we bumped into each other at the Bottom Line. But our friendship sort of took the back burner after we left high school. And I just sort of followed her career, and we'd be on the same bill together sometimes and say hello, but that was about it. And then when we did her album, it all came back. It felt like it was back in high school.
That's cool.
She did one tune about elephants, and I think Lou Marini was in the room, and I'm playing a solo and stuff, and I stop, and Lou turns to me and he said, "Elliott, elephants are not blue." I was playing the blues. So it was one of those, great silly moments.
Yeah. John Lennon was, so that was Milk and Honey. That would have been, of course, the double fantasy sessions, like with Jack Douglas. Was that when?
Okay, I got called in not that long after John was killed. So this was whatever the name of that album was, and the one after that, Yoko produced, put together a really wonderful band, and makes her entrance. She comes in, we're all sitting there tuned up, ready to go, and she says, "Good morning, ladies," all of us being men. And she totally broke the thin ice. It was just like we wanted to do everything we could to make her experience really great.
Okay, if she wasn't Yoko Ono, she was just your interaction with her, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about her. I know a lot of people, they hate her music, they hate her voice, they she's an easy, they go after her. But as just you meet this lady, what would your impressions be? And I'm not asking for dirt. I'm just going curious. So how would you describe this woman?
She is a wonderful avant-garde artist. Whether or not one likes her singing, it almost doesn't make any difference to me, because it's about what she's trying to do, what she's trying to portray. And of course, she's an artist with a conscience. You recall those, Stop the War things. That was real. She's for real. So she gets 1,000% of my respect.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't realize, and pardon my ignorance, I didn't realize that was after John had been assassinated, that you went in. Just that in itself must have been what was your first thought going into that? You're going, well, wait.
Well, my mind was pretty blown. Obviously, I love John, and I'd never recorded with him. A bunch of my friends did, McCracken and Spinoza and those guys. But here I was having a chance to make a little bit of a statement. And some of the stuff we played on was, tracks that John had already recorded, which I think came out on the album after the first one that we did with her. Mm-hmm. But man, what an experience.
You helped Donald Fagen and Walter Becker. You helped them on a demo in the early days, long before. Was that a band yet, or?
Good question. It was a band in the making. Basically, Donald and Walter and I were all part of a backing band for Jay and the Americans. And both Marty and Kenny from the Americans discovered that Donald and Walter had these other fine qualities other than just playing bass and keyboards. So Kenny took them into the studio and started making demos. And then they asked me if I would come and play on a bunch of the demos, which I did. It was great. It was, it was really watching the embryonic form of Steely Dan. And it wasn't until a year later, maybe, that the tapes found their way out to LA. And Jay Lasker, who was the president of ABC Dunhill, signed them as writers. And it wasn't until 6 months, 7 months went by where they were doing these little sessions, when they weren't supposed to be late at night in the studio. And Jay said, "Oh, I think these guys have something here." So Steely Dan was basically born.
What was your first impression of both guys when you first met them?
I really liked them. They were, you could say they were strange, and I don't mean that in any sort of bad way. They were just non-conventional guys whose focus was on art, literature, music. And they did an incredible job. Certainly, in the early days, so that whole succession of albums, of really pushing the boundaries. Reeling in the Years, Do It Again were almost pop compared to where they went.
Yeah.
But it was always interesting. Always interesting.
I asked Jeff about, I says, well, Do It Again, Round and Round, Bodhisattva. I says, I used to be a big Buddhist myself, not as much anymore, but did you know, Don, I don't even know which one it was, that they were into Buddhism back then?
I didn't know that.
See, he didn't either. He and I haven't published that yet. I don't think I put that part up yet. And I'm going, came out in the lyrics, or sometimes how it is. If you're pregnant, you notice pregnant women. If you're hyper focused on the number 9, you're going to see it everywhere, right? You never really know. Was he a reluctant lead singer back then? I always got the vibe that.
God, yes, absolutely. He hated the sound of his own voice, which is why they asked David Palmer to come and sing.
Yeah.
At a certain point, though, through about half of the first record, Donald decided that he wasn't happy with how David was portraying the way the song should go in his mind. And so he reluctantly took the reins as the vocalist. And of course, he's a wonderful vocalist. He's very, very expressive.
Yeah. And that's such different singers, too. That's the other thing. I mean, there's bands all over the place that have two singers that sound very different, and it works. But in Can't Buy a Thrill, I remember going, Mr. Palmer's vocals I love, but there was just something about Donald. I mean, you like what you like, right? You can't help that. That's the thing. Tell me about the guitar solo, that famous. Oh my God! I remember thinking it's the song with a guitar solo, or no, a guitar bridge. But tell me about your part in that.
Well, the reason I was asked to come and play to begin with for that song was Donald and Walter couldn't find themselves being happy with anything that was coming in the intro. Right? Different people tried different things, and it just wasn't making them happy. So I get a call, Elliott, would you come and play on this thing? We'll see what happens. We're at the Village Recorder, such and such at night. I went. I played it. I asked them to play it down once so that I could get an idea of what the tune was. And I hadn't demoed it with them earlier, so it was brand new to me. And I liked it. I liked several things about it. I liked the lyrics. I liked Denny's part was down already. And it felt Celtic to me, Denny's part, which basically Donald had written out.
Now that you mention it. Yeah. Now that you mention it. Yeah.
It's totally Celtic. So I did an EP back about a little after the turn of the century, in which I did my own version of Reelin'. And I used a lot of Celtic musicians. I'm friends with Bill Whelan, the guy who wrote Riverdance. So he got me all these wonderful, wonderful, fiddlers and barone players. And we did it a very different version. And I use Chuck Rainey and Bernard Purdy as part of the rhythm section so that it bridges the gap between the two styles. But yeah, so here I am loving the tune, saying, can I see a copy of the lyrics, please? So they did. They showed me the lyric. I said, great. Okay, let's give it a try. They ran the tape, and I finished playing from beginning to end. And Gary went, that's it, we got it. And from the back, he had the little tape engineer, the tape operator going, I never pressed the red button. So whether or not it was as good as or better than what you're hearing now, we'll never know. Having said that, the next take was another one taker all the way through. And what you're hearing is what I did. They actually pulled out a couple of extra fills, which you wind up hearing in the quad version, which I'm not that crazy about. But I thought it really worked really well.
Jimmy Page loves it.
I love Jimmy Page loving it.
That's amazing. The fact that Jimmy Page, I mean, of course, and listen, there's a part of every artist that has, it's just little old me. It's just like, but I hate to ask you an obvious question, but you get it, right? Like that is a monumental stop in your seat, staring at the speaker's moment in music.
It's a heck of an accolade, and I mean, I first met Jimmy back in 1967. He was on tour with the Yardbirds, and they were playing in Lima, Ohio, which is where I used to teach. And we got on like a house on fire. And then we hadn't really seen each other, bar a couple of times, when Zeppelin played the Garden or whatever. And, when I heard that he complimented me on that, I was like, no, that's really, really nice. He doesn't have to, he's a guitar god, isn't he? So,
what's your opinion on him on the Zeppelin thing? I'm just kind of curious. And I mean, his music.
He's a great creator. He's a really, really good creator. He understands intrinsically what it takes to make a really good sounding record. Of course, Jimmy was a studio guitar player in London for years before Zeppelin. So, he just had it and still has it.
So when you came back to Steely Dan, was it Reeling, or was it the two albums together that you just happened to be in LA to perform? It was because you were on Katie Lied and
the one right after, the Royal Scam.
The Royal Scam, right?
Yeah. So long story short on that is, after turning down an offer to join the band on the first album.
So they asked you to join the band, and was it immediate? You knew you didn't want to? I mean,
I took certain things into consideration. One of them was knowing all of the characters, and the other was knowing that if I was going to join the band, one of the guitarists would be unjoining the band.
Right. So
out of loyalty and out of seeing the scene for, what it might have become, which it did, I thought to myself, literally, these guys are not going to last as a band with the personnel longer than 3 albums. So on the first album, I did Reel, and I also did this really strange, very strange solo called Kings. And I didn't play on the second or third because they were the band themselves. And the fourth album, Donnie and Walter decided to try a bunch of different players. So I was invited back and got to play Throw Back the Little Ones. That's right. Which was fun. It was, for you musicians out there, it was quite the challenge, because it was basically, Elliott, roam free, but you see these notes here, you got to play these. And what it was doubling the horn parts that they had already put down. So they're going, improvise, read, improvise. So it was quite a challenge. But I loved it, and I loved the way it came out.
Do you remember who played drums on that? I don't remember. It doesn't say on Wiki. I looked it up and I couldn't find it.
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for that.
That's okay.
I was always brought in after the fact. I was one of the people who would, sort of finish up the painting, as it were. The third the album that I did with them, which was
Royal Scam.
Royal Scam, was so much fun. Now,
so what was the difference between those two? What made that so much funner?
Yeah. The first of the two we did in LA. The second of the two we did in New York. Different personnel, different vibe altogether. I mean, the vibe between the two albums is night and day. And what happened was Purdy and Rainey were both playing on the rhythm tracks, or at least on the rhythm tracks that I played. And Paul Griffin was playing keyboards. Now, Donald and Walter knew the dirt about how these three other guys sometimes got along, but sometimes could bite each other's heads off. And they wanted an album that actually had a large degree of angst and to it. So they pushed every button on those three guys, and they could have killed each other by the time those sessions were over. But the music hung together like anybody's business.
So who were the three guys?
It was Bernard Purdy,
right,
the drummer,
of course,
Chuck Rainey on bass, and Paul Griffin on keyboards.
Amazing. I mean, I've heard of stuff like that. To sort of, there's a, music there's a feeling. I used to think that when I had more fervor for what I did on the radio, it came across. I mean, I was a really new age guy for a lot of years, but I remember thinking things have feelings to them, and it doesn't hurt if you've got it. And hopefully it's the old thing where the album track sounds good, but the live version, oh my God. So I get that, but it was just overall a fun experience for you.
I'm sorry, it was
overall a fun experience for you. The Royal Scam.
Loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Tell me about.
And I still love every minute that I spend with the Steely Dan organization, if you will. I've done a couple of shows with them in London.
Yeah,
and it was a dream come true. Basically, I didn't have to go back to a hotel room. And, just getting up on stage, playing with my friends, and going home.
That's different, yeah. So what did you play when you obviously play Reeling in the Years, but when you come up on stage, do you play anything else?
I wound up doing whatever the encore was after Reeling actually was an encore at that point. And then there was an encore, which I don't remember.
Kirsty MacColl, tragic story. What a town. I mean, I did a video on that, not just the tragedy part of it, of the fact that, people, you should know who this woman is. Electric landlady. Yeah. Tell me about working with, and did you go back with her at all, or did you just meet her there?
I met her there. A mutual friend, an engineer called John Fausti, who was this legendary Latin engineer, introduced us. He was brought in to engineer Kirsty's album, even though still Steve Lillywhite was there because he was producing it. I mean, Steve could have done a great job, obviously, but they wanted John because of John's authentic salsa roots. And a fair amount of this album was kind of Latin based. So we hit it off. We hit it off really, really well. And I was on my way back to London after that, and so were they. And we wound up doing a bunch more creative stuff together. There was a little while I spent when she had a band, playing little live gigs in London. But Kirsty didn't like to perform live. She was absolutely petrified.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, her talent lay in the writing, both the music and lyrics of things, and also in having one of the most gorgeous voices ever in history.
Yeah. Who to you? Who was Kirsty? Who was she to you? Like, I mean, was she kind? Was she freewheel? I mean, like, what? How would you?
Oh
describe
yeah,
her?
we had an awful lot of fun together. We really, really did. We hung out at Stephen Kirsty's a lot. And we were soulmates, I would say. You know, we really sort of had this thing, this musical thing that we shared.
The Jimi Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix came to your freaking house. You guys jammed together. Your mother says, "What? Who's this guy?" That's, you know, I've heard a lot of Jimi Hendrix stories, but the fact that you had a chance, you two seem to have there's a real beautiful connection with each other.
Yes, both interpersonally and musically. Interpersonally, we were just these two space cadets looking to find whatever the magic formula was.
Yeah.
Musically, we shared an awful lot of ideas having to do with altering what were before known as, you know, straightish guitar sounds. And we were both into the fuzz tone very, very early, both into feedback very, very early. We used to smile at each other when we'd get up and play together. You know, a lot of grins, a whole lot of grins.
That says something. I hate to ask the obvious question, but because, you know, I'll always run into people say, "Oh yeah, it's just because he's dead," or but he was that good.
Yes, he was. He was, and it would have been amazing had he still been alive. You know, he had all these wonderful ideas and plans. He and Miles Davis were going to do a project together. That would have been absurd. You know, both of them reaching for the moon.
And he was disenchanted, like when you saw him at the Isle of Wight, and you knew right away there was something. I mean, because you knew the guy, you knew right away there was something downtrodden. There was something going on with him, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can just see somebody's face, and if you know them well enough, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And he was very disillusioned with both the music business and the fact that he felt as though he had become more of a pawn than a person.
Yeah, you wanted to know who his friends were, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's a tough thing to see someone in that. I mean, you know, they say the hardest thing you can have is getting everything you ever wanted. And then you start realizing, and sometimes you're paying attention to the wrong things when you're going after fame anyway. But he, and not that long after that, we lost him. What was your reaction? I mean, it's obvious what your reaction was, but
I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. And any inclination that I might have had towards stardom, and I still had back in those days.
Yeah,
that was it. Right. I don't want to go there. I'll do something else. I'll stay in the studios. I'll go play on stage when it's fun, but I don't want to be the guy that Rick Gunnell said, "I'm going to make you a star, kid." No, thank you.
Yeah. What was your relationship like? You had mentioned before with Denny and with Jeff. There's that thing about going in a room and going, we're going to make the record better. And that competition question that you obviously get often of playing. But let me ask you this. You were on stage someplace, and I forget who the gentleman was who told you you're on stage and you were doing something. And he said, "Look, they're just pointing out at all the guys with the guitar cases." What was that story of saying, "Oh, they're all out there to..."
I was playing. It was a tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan,
right,
who had just passed recently, and a bunch of us were invited to the Lone Star Roadhouse in New York to come and play a tribute, to play a concert in tribute to Stevie. And Cornell Dupree and I were on stage together. Cornell, for those who don't know, was the fourth person of that Bernard Purdie, Chuck Rainey, Paul Griffin. And then there was this incredible guitar player, Cornell Dupree. So Cornell and I are up there and we're playing our hearts out. And I feel one of these, look at them. And a bunch of guys with guitar cases all ready to jump the stage. And no, this isn't a competition. It's not a talent contest. This is a loving tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan. So why don't you have that software, do you think? Why is that a nurture nature thing? Why don't you look at 10 guitarists in a room, or maybe even 3, as
your competitors? Is it because of the song, because of the project? You know your place, you know what has to be done, the mission. Why is that?
Well, to own up, when I first started out as a studio musician, I saw all these other guitar players as competition.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until a year or two into the job that I realized, hey, these are really cool guys. And nice guys. They play great. And all of a sudden, you develop, not all, but through the time, you develop a camaraderie. You develop an appreciation for what all these people bring to the ball game. And I know for years, in session world, we used to do, I think Phil Spector probably started having 1 million guitar players. But in New York, we'd have at least 3 guitar players on a date. And the idea was to all of you make a lovely tapestry. It's not to scream, hey, listen to me, listen to me. It's about, again, servicing the music.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the Ronettes, did you work with Phil Spector?
No.
Because I
worked with Jack Nietzsche.
Yeah. Because
it said, a arranger.
It had said that you'd worked with the Ronettes at what capacity?
1963 at Renee and Rick Allman's. What's it called? It was down on 3rd Street in the Village. They had a little crazy nightclub that was doing entertainment from 7 p.m. till 4 a.m. And I came and did it a couple of times with my trio. And then at one point I get a call from the Allmans saying, hey, we got the Ronettes coming in. Can we have your band back them up? Sure. Okay. So we spent a week backing up the 3 girls, and it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. It was sort of my first taste of, working with people who were on the verge of becoming stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a wonderful experience the week after that. Right. They had a group called the Capris. They had a record called There's a Moon Out Tonight. And I was asked to be the musical director for that. So I did. And then the Capris said to me, hey, we'd like you to be our musical director on the road. Will you come with us? And by this time, I'm like 16 years old. And I'm breaking in, who knew, right? So I'm learning my skills really early. And it was great. It was really wonderful.
What was Ronnie like, Ronnie Spector? I talked to Eddie Money a few months before he died, actually. Mm-hmm. And, when he did the duet with her, he says, yeah, she just basically was a housewife by then. And she did the little old me, what, you want me, and
sure.
But what was she like? What was your impression of her?
Oh, she was sassy. All 3 of the girls were sassy. I mean, they were what, in their early 20s, maybe, or just approaching 20-ish. And they were having fun. They had all these wonderful gold spangled dresses and stuff that they'd get up on stage, very show busy. And we just, in the dressing room, which was really simply the basement of the cafe, we would just hang out and have a good time and laugh a whole lot and play R&B music together.
Wow. Yeah. I just talked to David Paich. I'm going to talk to him again because he's releasing his first EP. Not an album, but it.
Yeah. Send to my love, please.
I will. Oh, yeah. So when David Paich, I was telling him, last year or something, he gave me his email address. I says, pardon my ignorance, but I didn't know you worked with freaking Neil Diamond on Serenade, one of my favorite albums from that era. And, and then Beautiful Noise Beautiful Noise after that. But then by that time, Toto was starting. So he was only on one album, one song. Right. But so what was Jeff Porcaro, David Paich, and you have said in the past that you kind of regretted not doing that one.
Indeed.
What was that meeting like? Let's start there.
Okay. First of all, a little background. Sure. Both the Porcaros and David had parents or had fathers who were very, very successful in the music industry. Right? David Paich's dad was Marty Paich, who was this legendary arranger. And the Porcaros, had Daddy Joe, who was this world-renowned drummer percussionist. And I first met Jeff doing some show like Midnight Special or one of those old TV shows. And he was playing drums with a rather large ensemble that was backing up a single star. So I'm listening to this guy playing.
Was it Cher?
Crap.
Was it Cher?
It could have been.
Or Seals and Crofts? Yeah.
But I loved the way he played. We exchanged numbers. I was going out to LA a whole lot those days, and we became fast friends. And then in 1977 was when Toto was really, getting their starting motors going. And David and Jeff were living together in the canyon at that point, as I recall, in Laurel Canyon. And they invited me to become a member. And I said, I really, I'd love to do it, guys. I love you. I think the music you're making is great, but I just can't. And that was the way it ended. And the reason I could have kicked myself is because of all the bands that from that era that were able to move through time in a very elegant fashion, it was Toto. And I listened to some of the music and go, oh, God, I could have played great on that. But hey, that's life.
So they hadn't found Luke yet? They haven't...
Correct.
Wow.
I think that they were friendly with Luke, but they hadn't asked him to join at that point.
Jeff Skunk Baxter told me one thing. I say that because the audience sometimes forgets who I'm talking about. Yeah. He said, it's nice to be the first call guy. I'd never heard that before. I don't know why, but he says there's something about being the first call guy. Like, is that a term that you guys use?
Yeah. Although I wouldn't quite use it as blatantly. If I thought that, I would keep it to myself.
Yeah.
Of course, it's nice that people think of you first. Great little anecdote. There was a company in New York called Sherman and Kahn, and they started out as music producers. They did, I think, Hey Girl, Hey Girl, I want you to know, and a couple other tunes. And they wound up finding that producing jingles was a lot more to their liking. It was more financially secure, blah, 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 blah. So long story short, I was living in LA in 81 and 82. I come back to New York, right? Time to drum up some business again. And I called up Sherman and Kahn. I said, hey guys, I'm back in town. Would you think about, giving me a call? And the guy on the other end of the line, who was one of the sort of the guys who ran Sherman and Kahn, said to me very, very nicely, he says, Elliott, I hear what you're saying, but you got to realize, yes, of course we'll call you. But we love Dave Spinoza, we love Hugh McCracken, we love Vinnie Bell. So you'll all be playing on all these things, but don't expect all of a sudden the phone's going to ring every day and you're going to work for us. And, the light bulb went off. I was like, right, okay, I'm one of a whole bunch of really, really talented musicians who are for hire. And that's the way I leave it, even to this day, If I get an email from somebody saying, I'd like you to play on some tracks, great, let me hear them and we'll talk about it. And if I don't, that's okay. I got time to do my own thing.
Did David Paich and Jeff Porcaro play you anything when you guys met? Had they done, because back then David was the main songwriter in Toto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I hadn't heard a thing. It was just, we have this idea, we want to do a band called Toto. Would you be interested?
Mm-hmm.
But they already had this incredible respect for me because of who they are and what they do.
Mm-hmm. Studio Cats. I remember everyone was saying, "Oh, Studio Cats." And then we went further because I was 18 when the album was finally released, and we started, we made the connection. Oh, Boss Gags, and from there, and then learning about Jeff's, playing when he was so young. Frankie Valli. What was that experience like? To me, Frankie Valli seems like a character. Well, so does Paul Anka to me on some levels. But
Frankie's definitely a character. He's a little guy. I mean, in terms of stature, he's short. And it sort of enters into his demeanor. Does that make sense?
Yes, I know what you mean.
But he's got pipes. Man, this guy's got pipes. And I first met him back in the 60s. We were backing up a bunch of bands, and the Four Seasons were one of them. But that was just a quick occurrence. My playing on his record was a result of I was working a lot with Bob Crew, the producer, and he was producing Frankie's new album, and I was invited to come play on it, and I did, and it was wonderful. It was another one of those 3 guitar players sitting in a row. Okay, you do this, I'll do that, you do the other thing.
Crazy.
And it worked like a charm. Really worked like a charm. He was a nice guy. He is a nice guy. I mean, he's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure. You know, sometimes when 2 shy people sit together, not a whole lot gets said. And if you sense that, if I sense that somebody's shy, then it brings out my shyness. So really? I remember I sat on an airplane with him from New York to LA, or LA to New York. I'm not sure which. Long flight. First class, we're sitting, and they're giving us the roasted nuts and the champagne and all. And I think if we spoke for 15 or 20 minutes during the entire trip, it was a lot. But it was nice because there was a nice feeling toward each other.
Yeah, it's good to be comfortable to be silent. I mean, that's golden in itself.
Indeed, it is. Indeed, it is.
What was your experience like with Paul Anka?
It was just a quick studio recording. I'm not sure that I even met Paul. There's a lot of people that you wind up playing with as a studio musician, where you're brought in to be part of the rhythm section or an overdub person, and the person whose record it isn't there, which is sad because you want to get to know who it is you're playing for, and it could be fun.
How did you end up on 2 Kiss albums, 2 solo Kiss albums? Gene Simmons, Peter Criss.
Right. Well, I guess they knew all the people who were playing around New York, which is where they were recording their basic tracks. Their producer was a guy called Sean Delaney, who's no longer with us. But Sean was this wild, crazy musical genius who was also a former Green Beret and also did all of the pyrotechnics design for Kiss. Wound up producing these 2 albums. So I got called in to do first Gene and then Peter. And we had fun. I mean, doing Gene's album, they flew 4 of us, New York studio guy, from New York to London. They had a budget that wouldn't quit. I mean, I think the idea was to lose money. So they flew us on the Concorde.
Oh, cool.
This is back in, 78, I think? Either 78 or 79, I'm not sure which. And, we were getting $1,000 a day, whether we worked or not. And it was very nice. We were at, Richard Branson had a studio in Oxfordshire called the Manor. And it was like a centuries old, stone building with a great recording studio and kind of funky housing for the musicians. And the meals weren't that great, but the music was fun. And Cher was there because at that point she was dating Gene Simmons.
Yeah.
So it was Cher and Chastity and Gene and a bunch of New York crude guys and a bunch of very, very polite English studio people, people who ran the studio.
Richie Havens, the man who I always say, it's been said so many times, like he was a one-man band guy. He sounded like a band. And everyone knows that moment from Woodstock because people who didn't know him, and I didn't at the time because of my age, I remember going, what? Like, holy moly. Go ahead, sorry.
Richie is, in my mind, he was always my guru. I first met him when I was playing, we were talking about, in the Village when I was playing with the Ronettes. It was the club, Cafe Bizarre is the name of the club. As in bizarre strange, not bizarre where you buy things. So Richie was one of the 4 acts who every night, did 4 sets, and we got to know each other. And I remember him sitting across the street from the cafe, which was the NYU Law School, smoking a funny cigarette. I'm going, hey man, I want to try some of this. Oh, okay, never did before. And so he's the first guy who got me high. But he also was an absolute force, both in terms of his music, his voice, his social conscience. I mean, everything he said, you could believe that he meant. And his guitar playing style was amazing because he just, like this, just like a choo-choo train, and he had his own tunings, so it didn't sound like anybody else. And he could go for hours. He could just go for hours. I remember playing with him back in Denver, I think it was. Yeah, Denver. And, Denver's kind of high up. And he's playing, and after an hour, and the sweat's dripping off, he has to run to the side of the stage, take a couple of whiffs from an oxygen tank, and come back out and do the next part of the set. He was just an amazing guy. Big into numerology.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Did he ever do your numerology?
He didn't do my chart, although his roadie has a number of times. But his numerology had to do with a higher numerology than astrology. He explained the power of certain numbers and things. And to this day, I still take it with me. It's very powerful stuff.
I think it was someone in numerology told me I was going to die at 87. I don't think that was astrology. I think it was numerology. Live on the air. By the way, you're going to die when you're 87. Oh, thanks.
Well, don't.
Yeah, I'll be pissed off when I'm 86. Fame with Irene Cara.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I knew Irene before Fame because she was dating at her young age a drummer in a band that I was friendly with. And I got a call from, I think it was just a contractor, one of the times where it's good to be first call, to come and play for a movie track. I did. I came down. I met Michael Gore, who, by the way, is Leslie Gore's kid brother. And Michael had written the music to Fame. And it was at Media Sound Studios, which is gorgeous old church turned recording studio. And they had me play the intro, nothing, and then the solo. And for you musicians out there who have to deal with tricky situations, I'm in the middle of doing my solo, which is the middle of the tune. And Michael presses the microphone and says, Elliott, come in here. And turned out that Alan Parker, the director of the film, was in the studio at the time. And he said, I'm not sure how I'm going to cut the dance scene. So what I need from you are 4 different segments, each of which could be used by itself, but they also have to be contiguous so that if I decide to use all 4, it doesn't sound like, and now here's the next part, and now here's the next part. So it was an amazing challenge. It was a real nail biter, so to speak. How do I make these hook up? And to this day, when I listen to it, I get a little, because I can hear, where I would like to have done it better. But it was really quite a challenge.
Well, maybe you hear that, but I don't hear that. So
good. That's good to hear.
Darren Lowry wanted me to ask you, he's a fan of the channel. What guitar and amp did you use on Leadon?
A question I get a lot.
Of course.
This guy.
Oh, really?
This is my 1963 Fender Stratocaster. It's got a Gibson humbucking pickup in the neck position, which I put on because of a wonderful Canadian guitarist called Dominic Troiano.
I just interviewed his brother.
Frank. That's great. They're nice people. He's nice. Dominic was a prince. He was an absolute prince. So, yeah, I put this pickup on it and never looked back. I always loved this extra fat, juicy stuff that the pickup brings to the character of the instrument. And so for Leadon, when I got to the studio, I realized that there was no amp there. In New York, all the studios have amplifiers. So with my box of pedals and stuff, I can make any amp sound almost like any other amp, but there was no amp. So somebody told us that there was an amp in the storeroom right next to Village Recorders. which belonged to a guy who's now my friend, but I didn't know at the time. And it was this great, big, absolutely huge Ampeg VST amp. It had hundreds of watts in the amplifier itself and 8 10-inch speakers. It was loud. I mean, it was seriously, seriously loud. And somehow for the sound that I wanted, the best sound was to crank it all the way up. And I did it. And Roger just opened the door to the studio and said, whoa, and got himself a set of ear protectors, not earphones, ear protectors. Went out, so I did this a little bit as I was playing, found the spot in the room where he could place one AKG 414 microphone. Put it there, and the sound you get is the guitar, a cable, the amplifier on full blast, no pedals, no nothing. But I mean, you got to
Nick Triano, while I was doing this, putting this special together, because I'm having to go by year, it's an arduous task. It's like it's going to be a bit. I'm starting in 1960, I think. I haven't even decided yet, and going every video is a year. But with Dominic, so you knew him?
Oh yeah. He was playing with Bush at the time. They had just it was right post Mandala.
Yeah, interesting character.
Sweet man, really sweet man.
Some people, when they answer this question, they'll say things. I hate to preface the question with the people's answer, but they'll say things like, well, I don't want to go there. This is something I'd rather not go there. You're in the dentist's office and someone looks at you and say, hey, buddy, so what do you do? Because you open that door and your door goes on forever because you have done so much. But if someone asks you that, okay, what do you do for a living? What do you say?
I'm a multimedia producer.
What's that mean? They'll ask.
Well, what it means is I make music.
Do you know anything I would know of? They'll ask.
It depends on the way they ask.
I've never.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking to, get a whole load of new adulators. I'm simply trying to answer a question that somebody asked me. If somebody says, are you a guitar player? Yeah, I'm a guitar player. What have you played with? And if it's the right vibe, I'll go, well, I used to play with Steely. I used to play with this, that, and the other. So I don't really have a problem with it.
But that's your mantra right there. You just said, I hate to point at you, but the way you answered that question is the way we started this interview, of the fact that, yes, if it's the right vibe, you answered it like I thought you would. Great. No, but you know what I mean? Because you kind of looked at your career that way of going, well, this is good for, do I want to go there? Do I want to go there? Yeah. Anyway, there you go. SNL. What did you do on SNL? My little badge said music consultant. But what it really meant was I would come in when they needed guitar for certain skits. I was consulted for a number of skits as well, some of the more punky things, which really weren't my genre, but remember that Gilda Candy Slice? Gimme Mick. It up. Oh, it's really quite funny. Gilda Radner, Gimme Mick. So I had a lot to do with the formation of the arrangement and working with all of the not ready for primetime players to make it all happen right. And we got on like a house on fire. I don't care what anybody says about Belushi was a bully. Not to me. He was a cool guy. And that's the classic. That's the ultimate lineup, right? Everyone talked. That's first lineup. Geez.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
Hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you support the channel. There are links in the description. You can either make a donation on PayPal. You can also buy a t-shirt or join our Patreon. I'm John Beaudin. This is Rock History Book.